Thank you for joining Vehicle Service Pros for this exclusive look at the current state of right to repair. My name is Jay Sicht. I'm the managing editor for Motor Age Magazine. With me today are Stuart Amos, Vice President and General Manager of the Tech Sales and Service Division of the N.A. Williams Company, a representative agency to the automotive aftermarket, and also Chairman of the Auto Care Association's Tool and Equipment Committee, and Tom Tucker, Senior Director of State Affairs for the Auto Care Association. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us today.
Our pleasure.
Thanks for having us.
Stuart, would you start us off by telling us what the current state is of right to repair?
We have an agreement or an understanding is more likely with the OE manufacturers as a result of Massachusetts passing a state right to repair law. So that was a huge step. The manufacturers have pretty much agreed to adhere to that Massachusetts law throughout the nation. So we have cooperation, but it's only by way of basically a voluntary cooperation agreement outside of Massachusetts.
And as I understand it, there's no prohibition on what the cost could be to the independent repairer.
Correct. It mandates that they make the data that shops need and the other things available. Right now, it's typically not a prohibitive cost, but there's no ceiling on it. There's nothing to prevent any given manufacturer from having the cost to an independent shop being prohibitive.
What would you like to see changed on the current Massachusetts law?
We'd like to see this required or mandated, as legislation for the whole country, not rely on a voluntary memo of understanding, for the other states. And back to our other comments, perhaps something that would put some sort of cap or realistic, limit on what could be charged. And that hasn't been a problem to date, but, it's kind of open-ended. And then, we've got to look forward. The law works with current technology and the challenges we face now, but it's a moving target. Obviously, vehicle technology is changing rapidly, and the current regulation, may not stand up to the needs of future technology.
What types of technology is currently covered by this MOU? Is it primarily just concerned with engine control management, drivability and emissions and so on?
That's my understanding, and it enables the aftermarket shop to buy or have access for a fee to the OE data that they would need to repair or reprogram vehicles, anything relating to emissions, things like that. Most manufacturers make other things available too that are not just emission related, so they can access most of the electronic systems on a vehicle. But the current way it's done is probably not going to be around in the future. We're already seeing the trend shifting to wireless, where that data is not accessed or enabled to the vehicle through the OBD2 port. Over the air reprogramming is here already. It's available. We've all seen the news. Companies like Tesla do it now, and that type of thing the OE shop has no access to.
And how has President Biden supported the effort, and what does this mean for the automotive industry?
Yeah, Jay, historically, three sectors have been leading the charge: agricultural, cell phones, and the auto industry. President Biden's executive order raised the stakes and gave visibility to the issue as it relates to agricultural and cell phones. But his executive order also directed the FTC to take any additional steps they needed. They said that they're going to take a more aggressive enforcement stance in violations of actually Magnuson-Moss Warranty Act and right to repair violations. And that's how it affects the industry. The president's executive order raised the stakes of the issue, which all three sectors have been talking about for quite some time individually. I would say over the past 5 years, there have been over 100 bills introduced in states across the country as it relates to right to repair. But due to the MOU between the automotive aftermarket and the vehicle manufacturers, by agreeing to the MOU, we oppose any state efforts. And hopefully, well, the association is leading this year an initiative, the Repair Act, that hopefully will codify right to repair nationally and set a national standard.
So as I understand it, there's not any current legislation introduced at the federal level for this.
There is none yet, but
Okay.
we anticipate by the end of the month there will be.
Oh, okay, very good. Because say, would that be modeled on the Massachusetts law? That would be kind of used as the template for that.
I think so. I personally haven't seen the language. Our federal team is leading the push on that with other stakeholders, but we believe that it's modeled after the Massachusetts ballot initiative.
And then what additional language would need to be included to make sure that we are anticipating some of this technology that's coming down the pike and that's currently now there for wireless communications?
You know, I'll take a first step, Stuart. I think at the end of the day, the devil's in the details.
Sure.
You know, when they're writing the legislation, it certainly has to not only capture current standards, but future technology, future and emerging technology that we're going to be seeing in the next 1 to 3 to 5 years. Here's an example of that. When you look at, when you talk about autonomous vehicles, most consumers think autonomous vehicles is self-driving. But with ADAS systems, autonomous driving is already here. You know, it's not something far-fetched in the future. You know, you have self-driving, self-parking, lane assist. Those are all part of the autonomous driving features that are part of the vehicles. So I think the devil's in the details to your question. Stuart?
Yeah, no, I agree, Tom. And we already are facing ADAS situations. Yeah, I mean, almost every car has some of that technology, and simple things like wheel alignments, windshield replacements, all require access to that technology. So we're not talking about space age stuff. You know, you crack your windshield, shop's got to have that technology available. Just put a new windshield in your car now.
Yeah, there's really nothing very simple repair on a modern vehicle anymore. What do you see as our biggest challenges for getting right to repair passed at the federal level?
And I don't mean to bash the car companies. You know, they're putting out some phenomenal products, but you know, they have deep pockets, and they, you know, want this to keep as much of this revenue and business for them and their dealerships as possible. So, you know, we are David facing Goliath. Secondly is consumer education. If we can get a groundswell of support and people, you know, lobby their legislators, their lawmakers, that's a big part. And that education, both getting them to understand what the issue is and then how it needs to be dealt with, that's our big challenge. And that's why we're so encouraged by President Biden's order, because that sets a big precedent. And it's, again, it kind of, everybody can relate to that issue. So.
With broadening the issue to mobile electronics, such as cell phones and farming industry, how does that affect the automotive industry, the automotive aftermarket industry's position on that? Does it broaden the support? Is it easier to get support from legislators to get a law like this passed?
I think it can only help.
Right.
You know, you have quite a few legislators who represent the rural tier. And so farmers are a big part of our national fabric. Yep. And so those farmers have a very unique story to tell. But when you start dealing with cell phones, everyone from parents to grandparents to children has a cell phone. When we approach the elected officials, approach them as consumers with vehicles rather than this is an issue for us, because this is an issue for them also.
Sure.
They have vehicles, their families have vehicles, their children have vehicles, their constituents have vehicles. The businesses in their districts have vehicles that need to be repaired. This has to be an issue that is bipartisan, that everyone understands. This affects everyone. This is a universal issue.
We've discussed before why it's important for the automotive aftermarket industry to lobby our legislators what kind of language do we need to be using when we approach our congressman or senator in getting this moved forward?
When we approach the elected officials, we have to, again, they have to look at this as a consumer issue, and they're consumers also. I think the most important thing that we have been stressing over the past few years is, if you buy a car or lease a car, you're paying for the car, you're getting the car serviced, and you insure the car. You own the data in the car, so you should be able to determine who gets access to that data to repair the vehicle. And so if your preference is to take your vehicle to the dealer for service, that's your choice, and support that. But if your choice is to go to, Joe's shop on Main Street, or your local garage in the neighborhood, you should have that same right without the vehicle manufacturer firewalls or other barriers, so that the independent repair shop can have access to that data to repair the vehicle. At the end of the day, it's the consumer's choice. It's their vehicle, and they should be in charge of, not in charge. They should determine who gets access to their vehicle data.
And let me add, there's a big privacy issue from that aspect. And right now, consumers can't opt out. You can't tell your car not to send data to the manufacturer. And that data can be everything from, specifics about how the car is operating, to when you need an oil change and where you're driving. And we joke, but it's true, how much you weigh, because the car knows things like that, and how fast you drive. When I install a program on my computer, or I buy a cell phone, it usually says, would you like to share data with the manufacturer or not? And you can opt out. You can't opt out, even though you own the car, as Tom said. So it's pretty invasive.
It does seem like a glaring omission.
Yeah.
Sure. And Stuart brings up a very good point that I think is also one of the key issues that has to be addressed. With the vehicle manufacturers having access to the data, they now have a competitive advantage in the repair business, which I think is an antitrust issue. If you have a modern vehicle like I have, they ask you to download the app for your car. Once you sync your VIN to the app, you get I get a monthly email from the dealership telling me the vehicle health of my vehicle. Does it need an oil change? Does the tires need to be rotated? Are there any recalls? That's all good information. But what are they also doing with that information? My personal information. Having diagnostic information for the aftermarket is important.
Right. Stuart, do you have anything to add to that, or do you have any other?
No, the only thing I'd add in terms of message to our leaders, there's also a jobs issue. They want to save or help protect small business. Virtually every independent repair shop, or the majority of them, are small businesses. They're pillars of the community. They support the little and employ local people. And it won't be an instant thing, but if they lose this ability, their livelihood, their business viability is jeopardized. So
as well as their ability to hire new technicians coming out of school, which is the next generation of repair technicians in the industry. So this is a workforce issue, workforce development issue, and an economic development issue, as well as a small business issue that Stuart mentioned.
That brings up a great point, Tom. And with that, I thank you both for joining me today.